Cameron, Freckled Foodie, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Duh. Thank you
I,
for having me.
I had to have you. I'm so glad that I got you. We're going to talk about your life, your career, motherhood, all the things. For anyone who does not know who you are, can you give us a little bit of background?
So, I'm a content creator, podcast host, mental health advocate, and mom, soon to be of two. My background, I'm from Jersey. I am one of three girls. I'm the middle, which I do feel is important because I feel very like middle child. I'm extremely close with my family, and I married my high school sweetheart. We've been together for a very long time now, more of my life than not. Played sports my whole life. I played lacrosse in college, and after I graduated, worked in the corporate world for 5 years in sales and trading, and then did a complete pivot, remodeled myself.
I want to talk about that because, like, that is the point of this podcast. Everything is through the lens of change and transition. And I want to know, first of all, why did you do that?
For me, when I was working in the industry, I really thrived there in the sense that it was very parallel to like the sports world where it's team oriented, it's competitive, it's fast paced. Like athletes really thrive in that industry, in my opinion. And so I was doing really well. I had this great career path ahead of me and I really did enjoy it. However, I didn't feel passionately about the market, especially the product I was selling. I don't believe in the thing of like, wake up every morning and do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Like, that's just not true, in my opinion. And I felt I had found this great middle ground of I liked my job, I made really good money, and it was fun. And I thought I had a work-life balance. I didn't realize that like I didn't really, but I thought because I left work and could go the night without checking email that I had a great balance. I didn't realize that like balance typically includes being able to step off the desk for an appointment and all that kind of stuff. But for me, I started this Instagram, which was Freckled Foodie, just because I was dealing with digestive health issues. I started cooking because of that. I then was like, maybe I'll share this somewhere. It was kind of in the era that the wellness influencer slash food porn account was born.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, maybe if I have something, I'll get to eat it like Barbudo for free. And so I literally and so I started this account, and once I started it, I realized how much I enjoyed it, and then I would sit at my desk like first thing in the morning and I'd be on Infatuation, Eater, Well and Good, Mind Body Green instead of like Wall Street Journal, Barron's, any of the things that I probably should have been doing. And I used to say that was a red flag, and then during one of my interviews of a mentor of mine, he was like, "That's a green flag. Ding, ding, ding. This is what you are passionate about. Follow it," which is so true. And we can talk about this, like how your ego can be tied to an identity, and it's really confusing to switch those identities. I know we kind of talked about it personally with like motherhood and stuff like that, but I was so tied to saying that's what I did, and also the golden handcuffs of the industry. And I wasn't making any money off this account. So I had no idea how I could turn this into a job. And content creators now, I feel like, are way more common. This was 5+ years ago where there were people doing it full time, but we weren't seeing it all over. And so it was honestly not until I got hit by a car while I was crossing the street, and it just like turned my life upside down and made me realize that life is really short. And I was on disability with a bad concussion, and I couldn't really do anything other than like talk to people and journal and meditate. And I was like, I'll never be this young again. I had so many privileges that had set me up to be able to take this leap of faith. And I was like, I can always go back. It's not like this industry is going anywhere. As long as I leave on good terms, let's just see what happens. And here we are 5 years later.
I mean, that's a massive pivot. How did it feel in those like initial early days of like building Freckled Foodie? Do you look back on it fondly? Like, was it fun and exciting, or were you stressed because it's such a new role? Like, what were you thinking?
I was crazy when I think back. Like Delulu. When I left, and I think I had like 5,000 followers, not even. Like I was not making $1 on my account. And so again, we talk about privileges, right? Like I grew up financially privileged, so I didn't have student debt to pay off. I knew that I had a safety net if I needed it. And I had been able to save a lot from a job where I was making good money. So yes, I was in a place to be able to do this, but I'm someone historically was like a workaholic, put everything into everything, very competitive with myself and others. So I was burning both ends of the candle like hardcore. I was getting up at like 4:15 in the morning to do stuff for my account, to go work out, to get to the office by 7, to then come home, to work all weekend, like all of that for no financial benefit other than like this would be cool if we could grow this into something. And so when I told my now husband, then fiance, because I quit the year we were engaged, he was like, if you were someone who just kind of had the mentality of like, I'm just going to sit on the couch and binge watch TV all day, I'd question this decision. Like, do you need more structure? How are you going to kind of figure this out? But he was like, I've watched you every day for the past X amount of years at the beach, at your parents' house, getting up at 5:30 to make all of these breakfasts to go like hand them out on the street that people would like walk on in the mornings to try and get my name out there. He's like, you're not just going to sit around. You're going to do everything in your power to try and make this work. But when I quit, I think I felt, oh, when I leave this job, all my anxieties will go away because I won't be answering to someone else, and it won't be this intense pressure cooker situation every day because I succeeded in the industry for many of my characteristics. However, it also heightened some of my not great characteristics that were the same reason I was succeeding, like high performing anxiety, competitiveness. So I felt that when I left, everything would just be blissful. And that was not the case. And I remember seeing my neurologist, and my mom was with me, and I was talking to him about my anxiety and stuff. And he was like, well, are you more anxious now than you were before? And I said, no, that'd be crazy. I work for myself now. My mom's like, girl, reality check. You are 110% more anxious now. Um, and I think I had then had to grapple with this concept of like, okay, this life can be great and I can make this work and I can figure it out. But the grass isn't always greener, you know?
I mean, I think it's also like as a content creator, you're self-employed. Now it's on you to like make
Yes.
that work, which I totally understand. My one question for you is I think it's interesting that you talk about that you had this like competitive nature to you, like given your background and then also being an athlete. And that makes sense for me too. Like even when I started modeling, like I also had that in me. Like I was like, I'm in this because I want to be good at it and I want to like
Mhm.
be the best at it if I can. And I also want to make money. But how do you deal with those feelings now? Because like I think when you're getting it going, you probably used all that to your advantage because you're in like
Totally.
startup mode. You're like, I'm putting all of these things together, I'm building it, I'm growing it. But I think as you age and grow older and throw motherhood into it, like how do you deal with this like competitiveness inside you, which like it's a double-edged sword. It's a good thing and a bad thing.
I'm so glad that I did this when I did. That like I gave myself time to really put in every waking moment to build what I've created and also work through my own personal shit before having kids. So I
Mm,
am so grateful for the timing of that all. And now it's interesting. You know how when you're kids, I feel like you get labeled something in your family and then
mhm,
that's just what remains your label?
totally.
So mine would be the competitive one. And now if my sister uses that term around me, like describing me, I'm like, I really don't resonate with it anymore. Yes, sure, I can be competitive in things if I want to turn it on. But I used to be so intensely competitive and I just don't feel that way anymore. And so part of me thinks that it's been very beneficial because I've allowed
Mhm.
myself to soften as a mom. But I also think it's allowed me to find the middle ground that I so desperately wanted and I'm so grateful for of being this working/stay-at-home mom and being so hyper involved while still having my own thing. Yes, there are days where I beat myself up, and I think that's just human nature, unfortunately, especially in this industry to be comparative, but when I catch myself in those moments, I really think back to like, do I want to be the best? And honestly, no. And I think as a kid, I was constantly trying to be the best in everything. And then when I got to that top of the mountain, I had so much anxiety of staying there.
I know. I get that. I feel like for you, I can understand like why that would be like uncomfortable and like stressful for you. Listening to it, I'm like, that's so admirable. You're very similar to like my husband in that sense that like people who hold themselves to such high standards, I just like love being around people like that because it makes me
But to
better. So
what extent?
I know. I
That's
know,
what it is.
because then you're kind of, like, hypercritical and, like, constantly focused on, like, more, 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 better, better, better. I totally understand. In terms of, because we touched on motherhood for a second, you went from Freckled Foodie, now you're
Mhm.
Cameron Oaks Rogers. That also is a shift. Of course, it was a conscious decision to change your IG handle, but I feel like your content has also evolved. I would love to
Yeah.
talk to you about why you did that and what that evolution looked like for you.
Definitely. It's been a long time of debating. What it is for me, when I started, I was still in the corporate world, and so I wanted my face and name nowhere. Like, I was not shown on my account. It was all food. You would not know who I was because I did wanna keep them separate. Again, I was working in a really intense industry. I was young. I had big clients. I didn't want them taking me any less seriously. When I quit, I started sharing about the behind the scenes. When I left, I wasn't doing full-time content creation. I was actually, like, meal prepping for people in their homes and doing health coaching and all, and that's how I was making money. And so for the first, like, 6 to 9 months, that was the primary focus and why I was able to, like, stay afloat, and I had no overhead because it was just me. And then I realized, wait, I actually like the content creation aspect more, so I stopped the, like, meal prepping work and focused more on my content. But when I was sharing what I was doing and how I was also going through these mental health struggles and all of that, and I used to do this thing called like Unfiltered Day, the first of every month, where I wouldn't use any filters
That's a big
and
deal.
I would like pull the curtain back and share my day and answer questions. And I share very FaceTime-esque where I'm like, "Hey, we're just gonna chit chat." But I remember my little sister being like, "If you ever talk to the phone, I'm taking your account away. That is so embarrassing." I'm like, "Oh my god, I would never do that." And here we are. But when I started sharing more about mental health stuff and my personal life and just thoughts, that's when I felt I was really connecting with my community. And I started to include more of that in my content. Then when I got pregnant, honestly, food just disgusted me. So
Mhm.
that kind of paused the food content and it became a little bit more wow, pregnancy is a lot harder than I thought. These are the things I'm struggling with. These are the things I'm experiencing for the first time and my mind is blown. And when I started sharing that, that connected with a whole new community, but in a deeper level than I felt I ever had. And for me, the messages I was receiving of support and oh my god, I'm experiencing this too, I thought I was alone, etc., meant so much more to me than someone like making my recipe. And so that kind of then continued to shift as I became a parent, as I experienced postpartum and motherhood and all of that. And it wasn't honestly until I started working with my new management that they were like, what do you enjoy doing the most? And I was
Mm.
like, connecting with my community through sharing what's happening in my life and hearing what's happening in others and just reminding everyone that we're all going through something. And they were like, okay, nothing that you just mentioned in this 20-minute conversation has anything to do with food. So why are we Freckled Foodie? And I was like, okay, fuck. So we did switch. And I remember it feeling like this huge thing. And I was like, okay,
It
done.
is.
It was, yes, but okay, the one thing I will say, and I don't know if you ever felt this way because I don't think you ever had a different handle, but it was kind of nice to like I still feel weird sometimes that not that I have a following, but it's just confusing. So it was nice when I met people out and they'd reference me as Freckled Foodie because I'm like, oh, we can talk about her like she's a separate human. Do you know
Hmm.
what I mean?
She's your alter ego. Yeah.
But I still reference like people still will call me Freckled Foodie, and I still love that. Like it's still my podcast name, it's still my website. I reference my community as FFM, etc. It's still very intertwined. It's just no longer my handle.
Did you feel any sort of, like, sadness that you were, like, leaving food behind in a way? Or were you like, "No, this is a natural transition into, like, what's going in my life now?" Like, for me, sometimes people will message me and be like, "I miss your old content," which, by the way,
Mhm.
was me, like, jet setting to, like, fashion shows in Europe, like, every other day, and I'm like, "Guys, like, I'm a freaking mom, like, I live
Right,
in
you're
the
not doing it
suburbs, like,
anymore.
I'm sorry, but, like, my life has changed," but there's a part of me that when people say stuff like that to me, I'm like, "Well, yeah, me too." Like, I know I'm not jet setting, but, like, is there a part of you that's like, "Oh, this is, like, what I used to do and how I started this," or are you just more like, "This is the natural transition and I feel confident in this direction?"
A few things. One, it's not like I totally wrote off food, same way to you. You're still gonna travel. It'll be
Yeah.
different. So for me, it's still one of the like umbrella pillars of my content. It's like mental health, motherhood, parenting, food, and food fits into motherhood. Like for instance, I used to be making all of my content primarily focused on like meal prepping for office lunches.
Mhm.
That makes no sense to me anymore because I don't go to an office. So, like, why would I create that content? But now some of my food content is lazy effing dinners for your kids or like what I'm packing my toddler for school lunch. So it's still integrated, but we can't. I feel very passionately about this. You have to decide as a consumer what you're interested in, and you can't hold a creator to like one
Mhm.
particular stage of their life because like any human we all evolve. So it's been so fun that some of my community has evolved with me, and they've gotten pregnant around the same time, had kids around the same time, and they've been here for it all. It's also been so fun that I've connected with new people who found me maybe through motherhood stuff and were like relating in that stage of their life. And I also fully understand that like some young people who were here for certain aspects of my content who now don't resonate or relate to anything that I post may not want to follow me anymore. So I have always been like, if I forced myself to share stuff simply because that's what I once did, I would hate this job. That would be
Mhm.
so not fun for me. And also, I always promised myself that I would show up authentically as myself every day. And that would just feel like a fraud. So no, I don't feel any of those emotions towards that stage of my life.
That makes sense. I feel like it's funny when I look back and think about how I found you, and you were pregnant. We were pregnant at the same
Well,
time.
no, do you know how I found you? I found you.
How'd you find me? Oh, that's right.
Your one YouTube video went viral. Well, I mean, so many of yours, but one went really viral about body image and modeling. And
Yes.
I remember I posted it on my story and tagged you. And I was like, I loved this and like something. And you reposted it. And I was like, oh my God, what? And then I said, I'd love to have you on my podcast to
And you were
talk
like the
about
one of
that.
the first podcasts that I was ever on. You're so right. That is how we initially
And then we
connected.
started, yeah.
And then we started chatting, but I think when you talk about the different seasons that you're in and when your followers connect with you, I felt so connected with you while you were pregnant the first time. We were
Mhm.
pregnant at the same time and you had your series, What the Fuck is Happening to My Body? Which is
Yes.
still, it's so funny because like in my inner circle of friends, like when people, they all know you from that as well. And when they found out that I was friends with you, they were like, you know Freckled Foodie? I was like, yeah. And they're like,
That's
is
so
she going to
funny.
be at your baby shower? I was like, she is. Do not embarrass me. But they are just like, I feel like in New York, like people just absolutely love you. But anyway, that's a side spiral. When you started doing What the Fuck is Happening with My Body, you've been so open about like how you feel about your relationship with your body going through this massive change. Was that something that you were just like, this is what I'm going through? I have to share this? Like, or I feel like not everyone wants to be open about that. And you get flack for it too.
Well, you know what it is? Okay, twofold. One, I was honestly just shocked because I thought I was going to love being pregnant. I always envisioned myself just so pumped for that period of life. And so when I wasn't enjoying it, it was the rudest of like expectation versus reality not being the same. And part of me was like, "What the fuck, everyone else? Why did no one tell me to expect any of this? Like, what have I been lied to my entire life? Like, all I envisioned. Did you ever watch Now and Then as a kid?
Yes,
That
yes.
movie. It's one
Yeah.
of my favorite movies. And there's one scene where she is using her belly as a table for a bowl. I think it was grapes or maybe it was ice cream. And I just remember being like, I cannot wait. Like, that's what I was excited for. That's what I envisioned. I don't know why that's so deeply ingrained in my brain. I've seen the movies way too many times, but I just felt lied to. So that was one of the reasons I felt compelled to do this
Yeah.
because I wanted other people to maybe get a heads up of like, hey, your boobs turn into Spider-Man veins and everything's just like a spider web of blue. You smell horrific. Your acne's awful. Hair grows out of everywhere. Like, not enjoyable. So it was that, but then it was also I don't feel uncomfortable sharing my own stuff. I've always been a very open book about, like, my stuff. If it's my story to tell, I'm like, "I'll tell anyone, I don't care. What?" I've always been that way. Like, sometimes I leave a situation, I'm like, "Why did I say that?" Like, I was with no, Emily. They're my friends now, thank God, but I was at, like, a mom's night. I moved to the suburbs for people who are listening, and I was making new friends, and we're at a mom's night, and we're talking about how I'm pregnant, and I said I was going to pelvic floor physical therapy, and I was like, "Yeah," and she sticks her finger, like, up my butthole. "Did you know you can, like, release your pelvic floor that way?" And I left that night being like, "Why did I do that? Why can't I just shut the fuck up?" So, I think that was it, that I felt no sense of, like, maybe people will judge me for this. But as you mentioned, it definitely resonated with a lot of people. I actually looked back at the first one recently because I remember being so pumped to put it out there and then feeling such validation of like, "Oh my god, this did so well. People really engaged with it. They connected with it." So in my head, that reel, which was IGTV at the time, got like 1,000,000 views because that's how it felt. And I looked back and I think it got like what my average random ass reel will get today, which is so funny. But I yeah, I just had so much fun with it.
It's interesting that you share that you're an open book. You're willing to share anything, and I love that about you. And I think that's why people in your community feel so close to you. But do you ever feel like then people feel like they that you owe them some information into like
Yeah.
your inner life? And this might venture a little bit into the conversation around children. And I know you're really open about not sharing, your children online, and I'm the same way. But I'm curious, like where you draw that line, because you say you're an open book, but also like you're a mother now. It changes things.
And so that's why I think I clarify, like, I'm an open book about my own shit. Like,
Mhm.
I'll say anything about what's happening to me, but my children are not me. So,
Mhm.
like, for instance, my son, I shared him a few times when he was first born, and then I kind of really decided I didn't wanna share his face, and really just didn't wanna share him that much, and then recently, when I had been using his name online, because I put that information out there, people would comment or message or whatever and reference his name in a way as if, like, they knew him because they felt they did, kind of, and that made me slightly uncomfortable because I'm like, I get why people feel connected to me. I get that, like, there is that parasocial relationship, but I feel icky about people feeling that way about my child.
Mhm.
And so I decided to reference him as like a pseudo nickname moving forward on my page. And I got a lot of questions about it. Some people being like, "This doesn't. Why does this even matter?" And I'm like, I don't care if it doesn't matter what you think. I'm the parent here, so like I really don't feel the need to justify. But there is that sense of when we feel we know a creator or someone that we've created this relationship with on kind of one sided online, that we deserve everything. And
Mhm.
I have in the past felt pressure is the wrong word because I feel if it was pressure, I would then feel like I had to, and I don't. More so just like, hey, no, this is my boundary.
Mhm.
And that's why I always say my family, my husband, my children, like this isn't their page. And when it comes to parenting, it is an interesting line to walk. And I know we talk about this a lot of
Mhm.
it's also confusing as a creator to like
Mhm.
figure out where you fall because yes, sure, we're moms and my content especially is focused on motherhood, but I'm not sharing my kid. So that confuses the shit out of a lot of people. It takes me off the
Mhm.
table for tons of brand partnerships, which I will still forever stick to my guns to. But it's also confusing when like there's stuff that happens with our kids, whether it be medically or whatever, and it's a lot on us and it's very real in our lives and it's taking up a lot of brain space. But I'm like, I don't want to share that online because that's not my story, that's theirs.
Oh, I mean, I totally agree. I feel like I don't like to be, like, high and mighty about it because a lot of people share their family in a lot of different ways, and, like, sometimes I feel bad even talking about it now that I've moved to the suburbs and I'm not surrounded by other content creators, and they're like, "Oh, but I share, like, my daughter," and they're like, "I have 400 followers." I'm like, "That's, like, different."
It's so different. It's so
I'm
different.
like, I have almost 3 million people watching, and for me, with my children, I picture them in the center of a stadium with 3 million people watching, and I'm like, I would never do that to
Never.
them in a million years. So it completely resonates with me too, but it's just interesting because I feel like I'm sure for your community, they're like, you share so much, you give so much. I mean, I remember when you were about to give birth, it was like the Super Bowl. I was watching your stories, like
I literally was
waiting.
just talking about this with my friend.
I felt owed. Like, what did she have the baby? Is she gonna tell us? And that was, like, very early days in our friendship.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
What I try to always remind myself as the consumer is like, I'll get it when I get it, if I get it. The internet is so confusing. And when it comes to the parent conversation, like in the beginning, I was very much like, everyone kind of do their own thing, whatever. I now am a little bit like, you know what the hell you're doing by posting certain things of your children, and I'm pretty openly anti. And especially lately, I posted about this on my stories the other day. I've been seeing these TikToks. I don't know if you're on this side of TikTok because
Mm,
you don't have a newborn, but um, people doing like spend the night with me and my newborn
I
style.
get
It's almost
those.
like a day in the life. And they've got fucking ring lights on. They're like shoving them in the kid's face at like 1 in the morning. I'm like, what? Literally, there was a get ready with me 5 hours postpartum. Like, what world have we created?
I know, I agree. I am on that side of TikTok, and yeah, I think it's like the Wild West content and social. Like, I think people are, like, eventually going to figure out, like, maybe what's right and what's wrong, but right now it's very, very murky. But I did want to talk to you a little bit. You mentioned mental health, and we mentioned that you're so open, and you have baby two, number two is on the way. Is your mental health any different the second time around? Are you approaching it any different the second time around during pregnancy and postpartum? I'm curious.
Pregnancy wise, my first one was very anxiety inducing. I
Mm,
think because there was so much unknown. And this time around is way less anxiety and way more depressive. I don't
mm,
feel that way now, but my first trimester and like most of second was very just depressive for me. I felt really isolated and alone, even though I have such a strong community and family and wonderful partner. I just felt really confused and lost, and again hating the experience of being pregnant and grappling with those emotions. So mentally, they did feel different. Right now, I'd say I'm in a decent mental space. For postpartum, I felt like I really struggled that month, like 4 to 6, 7 window, and I think part of that was because I never gave myself time to adjust to, like, the fact that I had a child. I tried to do it all with a newborn and jump back into work and, not set any boundaries and be social and do all of these things. So this time around, I am definitely excited to like hibernate. I also think the time of year is so
mhm.
different that it allows me more hibernation period. And even like my mom's on my fucking ass about holidays and this and that. And I'm like, expect me not to be at anything. And if I show up, that's a bonus because I have a newborn, and setting those boundaries in the beginning. And also, we are having a postpartum doula that will help 3 nights a week. So I think sleep will hopefully be beneficial because I didn't get much of that in the beginning. And on that note, we're going to try and combo feed from the beginning so that not every feed falls on me, doing those small things to hopefully help. And when it comes to work, like, I am implementing a more serious maternity leave. Also, now I have more people to support me from a work standpoint than I did the first time around. I don't know if you feel this way, but reflecting back on the first, I do feel like it went so quickly, and I wish I had soaked up more of it and enjoyed more of it. And I do think this is my last time. So I'm also leaning into that of like, we're not going to get these newborn contact naps again, and the rest of the shit can wait. And I also feel lately I've been consuming content of creators who just gave birth and feeling like there's this not pressure, but movement of suddenly we all have to act like we didn't just have a baby and let's go on with our content and share everything. And I'm like, we as creators, we also have to acknowledge that like our your lives change so drastically and we should be giving ourselves that time. And I know this is a whole other conversation because there's no I mean, maternal leave in general is a joke in this fucking country. 1
Mhm.
in 4 women return to work 2 weeks after giving birth. Like, there are still golf ball blood clots coming out of my vagina at that point. And in general, also as creators, there's no guidelines for any of this, and you're kind of just not making money. So there are definite privileges to be able to take the time, etc. But I have worked my goddamn ass off these past 6 months to really implement like time off to take care of my child.
I love that you go into it like that with such a structured view of like I am taking a formal maternity leave. And
Mm,
I actually like didn't even really fully realize like even since the beginning of Freckle Foodie that like you gave yourself that level of structure just generally. I think it's really smart. I felt the exact same way after I had both my kids. I did a Q&A the day I came home
I
from the
mean,
hospital with my first. Was
Emily,
that necessary?
I called you when you were doing this fucking panel, and I'm like, "Emily, no."
Yeah, and I was yes, so I did a panel, like, 2 weeks after I gave birth to my second, and it's weird, and I'll be curious if you have the same experience, but with your second, because you're so much more confident and it's a little bit less jarring, you're kinda like, "I think I'm good." Which, by the way, was not good. It wasn't good. I
I was
wasn't good.
just gonna say,
And
I love you so fucking much, but in what world were you like, "I'm good"?
I wasn't. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, like, for you, your toughest months postpartum were like the 4 to 6 month mark,
Yeah.
because that was actually my experience the second time around. And I'm
Mhm.
actually like in the midst of it right now,
Yep.
AKA I'm pretty unwell. Um, I'm like 5 months postpartum.
But I think it hits us all at different points because we had very different first postpartum experiences. Because remember,
Yes.
I was out of the house right away doing stuff, and I remember you being like, I can't even fathom taking Teddy somewhere."
Hmm.
And maybe now the second time around, you felt how I felt, and maybe that's why you're struggling now, which is when I struggled, because you never fully came to terms with the fact of what happened.
Yes, it's so true. I just think that, like, the second time around, I just jumped into things so much more quickly. I felt like I was okay, and it boomeranged. It really backfired on me because by, like, month 3 or 4, I was so fatigued, and not because I had a newborn. I was fatigued because I was doing so many other things. So, my follow-up question to that was, if you look back at Cameron, baby number 1, in the midst of it, like, waking up, what would you say to her? And to the same someone who's listening right now who's, like, in the newborn phase?
Well, I always like to remind someone that it's temporary, which I
Mhm.
do think will help me this time around, comparing the 2 experiences mentally. Like, the first time I had such a hard time with the identity shift
Mhm.
because I was like, "Who am I? I'm a mom. I have a kid." It was also a very confusing time in the world. We all thought COVID was over, so New York was, like, back and better than ever, and I was in this, like, breastfeeding postpartum bubble of my apartment. So, I'm hoping I won't have that identity crisis this time around because I've been so comfortable and confident as a mom for now 2 plus years that, like, it's something I'm used to. However, I also think that statistically, like, it's nice for me to lean back on things where I'm like, "No, I will sleep again." Like, I got to a point of my life where I was sleeping with a child. So it just takes time. This isn't forever because I think in the beginning, your first time around, it's like you don't know anything. So you've convinced yourself that your life is always going to be 5 feeds in the middle of the night. Um, so I would definitely say it's all temporary. I would also just like give myself so much more grace. I feel I was really hard on myself and again, I just acted like I hadn't gone through this monumental change where I was just going about my life and that I think came back to bite me in the ass when I then returned back more to work and everything else. And so I do want to take that time while I'm off to really come to terms with everything so that I'm in a better mental state when I'm returning to other aspects of my life.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, and I hope I have a third, and I'll do that too for my third. I was going to say, I mean, you mentioned the identity shift that is becoming a mother. I'm assuming you knew you wanted to have kids. Did you like welcome this shift with open arms? Did you have moments where you were like, I don't like this. I want to go back. Like, what did it look
I
like?
mean, in the beginning, I think there were more times than feeling I love this shift. There were more times of, wait, what have I done? And I loved my kid. I obviously still do, but it wasn't that. It was no resentment towards the child. It was more just, what is my life now?
Hmm.
What's happening? Will I ever feel free to do anything again? And I did always want kids. So it was less of that and more of like, wow, this is way more consuming than I ever could have imagined. Um, and then I think it shifted into, for me personally, a new persona, which I think was hard to grapple with in the beginning because you don't, everyone talks about quote unquote bounce back when it comes to physical stuff. I didn't feel there was enough conversation around who you become as a human. And I don't think you ever bounce back to that version of yourself. I think you have to then meet a new version of yourself, which is so confusing along with everything else happening. So I was then meeting this newer version of me who I softened in a lot of ways mentally. I also had new fears and anxieties that I never could have imagined. It felt like a part of me was truly living outside of my body. And all of those things coming to terms with and meeting this new person where they were, once I was able to do that, I remember around month 9 was when I really was like, okay, I feel good. Like I feel happy again and like I can enjoy my life and like I like this version of me. And then I felt the most confident I've ever been, the happiest I had ever been. So just myself because I didn't really care anymore. It was the final shedding of caring what people think about me because I'm like,
Hmm.
I'm everything to this kid. So what? Some stranger thinks I'm XYZ. What the fuck do I care? I'm this kid's hero. And that's all that matters. So it was this new, I like leveled up, I feel.
Yeah, I love the like I don't give a fuck attitude that came with becoming a mother. I feel like it changed me in such a way. Like I'm such a people pleaser. And I felt like after I had my first, I was like, you all can go pound sand because
Literally.
I am not listening. I don't care. Like I need to do this my way. But I like the way that you said that because it is true that it's like you really truly do meet a full new version of yourself. And I felt like for me, I mean, obviously for me, I was mourning a lot of different things, like even my modeling career. Like I was like, I'll
I was gonna
never
say you mourned also a career part of,
a
yeah.
career part of it. And sometimes I'm like, do I want to go back to that? Would I go back to that? What would that even look like? But speaking on career and you have content, you're pregnant now. I kind of like to ask people, what does your village look like? Because I feel like even though you're setting up for your maternity leave, like you still have a lot on your plate. Plus, like you just moved to the suburbs. Like, what
Mhm.
systems do you have in place that allow you to kind of do everything that you're doing right now?
Okay, so first and foremost, my partner. He is literally my everything, rock in all aspects of my life. But he is so hyper involved as a parent where it really is the two of us doing things together and we talk about this all the time, like the privilege of both of our careers allowing us to spend so much time with our child is the greatest gift we could have ever been given. And so, without the structure that we have created and life that we've built, I would not be able to do any of the involvement slash work I do without him. So he is the main part of our village. My both of our parents are very involved and close, which is such a goddamn blessing. And not only are they close, but they want to be involved. They actively want to help, which is so wonderful. And it's been the greatest gift they could have ever given us, and I know they feel giving them a grandchild is the greatest gift we could have ever given them. Um, I have our childcare situation is kind of in flux right now, but we have someone who is a extended leg of our family who's, like, become one of my best friends. She's 30 and awesome, so, like, we're in a similar kind of stage of life. She was helping us 2 days a week before our toddler started school. Now our toddler's in school 4 days a week, so our village includes his teachers.
Mhm.
And she comes once a week to kind of help, like, around the house and with pickup and stuff, and then after Joe and I take our parental leave, she'll pick back up to help with the baby. And then in terms of work, my village, I have an incredibly supportive management team who helps me. Like, I always like to give, like, details of this because I think for people not in the space, they're like, "Well, what does a management team do?" They're the ones who are communicating with all of the brands, they're doing all of the negotiating, they're doing all of the contracting, all of the invoicing, all of the billing, like, all of the logistical stuff that I hated doing
Mhm.
and also, like, don't have knowledge in. That's not my industry per se. Um, I have a right hand, Kelsey, who manages my life, my calendar, my sponsor content, making sure everything's up to date, my newsletter, all of those things. She will be the one in the emails and doing all of that during maternity leave. And then when it comes to my podcast, I'm with a network, so Dear Media handles all of the ad sales, billing, invoicing, etc. And I have a producer there, Josh, who make sure the show, like, is out every week, which is very important.
Yep.
And then with that, I also have my right hand for my show, Amelie, who I actually played lacrosse with in college. And she's been with me for now, like, I think a year. And she helps with all of the booking, the guest briefs, the show notes, all of that. And we did just bring on someone else also, Julia, who does the trailers. So, like, for the past 5 months, we've been working so hard on scheduling guest interviews, show notes, recording all of the ads, getting the briefs, trailers, everything so that the show can still release every week and I will not have to lift a finger.
That is so freaking admirable, and that amount of work, like, energetically, I genuinely don't know how you're doing that. I love that you're open and sharing about your village. I feel like sometimes, like, whether and I like that you share your village, like, your work village and also, like, your family village and being transparent about
Oh,
that.
wait. Oh my God. Wait. I also forgot Chloe. I can't forget Chloe because I forget that she's like part of my work village because now she's also just one of my best friends. But Chloe is also included in our work village of, like, the brains behind ideation when it comes to trends, content, that kind of stuff.
So these are all the people that kinda help you professionally with childcare. I wanna hear how you set you up. This is something we've talked about in terms of your morning routines. I'm very interested in this. I was, like, taking notes. How do you set up your day so that you get the best camera that can come to the table?
Okay, so the way that I get the best version of myself is that I have to start the day alone. I need me time. And I am very, very intense about this. And my sister will say, she's like, "You're such a structured person." And I'm like, "I don't know if it's structure. It's more that I have habits that I know help me, and I know what happens when I don't do them, and I'm such a better version of myself when I do them, so I'm like, why wouldn't I do them? That's what keeps me doing them, I guess. So, my mornings, I'm up usually an hour and a half-ish before our son gets up, so I'm usually up at, like, 5:45, and I wake up, I meditate, I have, like, water, my supplements, etcetera. I free write in my journal for, like, 5 minutes. It's nothing like I'm sitting there for hours. I'm just getting some thoughts out. Then I allow myself to quickly, like, look if I have any texts from the night before because I go to bed early, so most of the time I have texts from friends at, like, 9:30 that I've just not been on my phone for because my phone is away for the last hour of the night. And then lately, I did just get a treadmill, so I've been making my coffee and going down to the basement and going on the treadmill and walk for a little bit just because I right now, that's just nice for me to be able to move, but typically pre-pregnancy, I would do a workout of sorts. I just now can't fathom, like, walking up to the gym and doing the whole process. So I walk in my pajamas on the treadmill while I read or I listen to a podcast and I have my coffee. And then I have to have a morning poop by myself in solitude. Like, that's really important to me. Honestly, probably the reason I wake up early, for being honest. And then I will wake up our son. I own mornings with the toddler. Joe is in charge of our dog in the morning, and then at night, I mean, I'm in charge of letting our dog out to pee. He doesn't go for a night walk, and Joe does nights with our toddler. So I wake him up, bring him downstairs, we have breakfast together, etc. And then he now is dropped off at school by 9, so that's been really nice for me to like go into my work day. And I know we talk about this, but like in my best world, I have a day where like I'm podcasting. So I'm doing all of those things. I have a day where I'm recording, and then I have a day where I'm editing. That less has happened pregnant because there's just so much going on, but that's how my brain operates the best. And so I do try to time block. As someone with ADHD, it's incredibly helpful for me to like focus on one type of work for a period of time. So I do try to block off like, okay, this 2-hour window, I'll record the sponsor content that needs to get done. This 2-hour window, I'll do all of my podcast ads and reads and guest intros, etc. That's not always a perfect science, but that's what I try to do.
It's really admirable. If anyone's listening right now and you're like, wow, my morning routine stinks, me too. I am horrible. And when Cameron told me about her morning routine, like I was like in awe
Okay, but
because I
can
thought that
we
was just
just
something that
say
people said.
I know
But
my friend Jess is like, "You're the mom that everyone fucking hates on TikTok." Like, I get up an hour and a half before my kid, but I am a different person. Like, the reason I have patience for my child is because I've done that. That's why I do it. If you're fine, then do whatever the fuck works for you. But like for me, I need that. And I know we talk about this, but like the worst thing you can do for yourself is wake up and scroll on TikTok.
I know. And I'm sick in the head. I need help because that's what I do.
You've
And
gotten
now
better.
I've gotten better, but I like for anyone listening, like I literally am downloading apps to like try to block myself from using my entire phone because I'm just fiending for like 7-second videos that make my brain turn to mush. But
It's
that's
an
just
addiction.
me. It's an addiction. It's a real problem I have. Like I truly do believe like 10 years, 20 years from now, it will be like there will be rehab for your phone.
Of course there will.
Has to. Anyway, okay, my next question for you, transitioning into the suburbs. What has your transition to the suburbs been like? Did you always know you wanted to move to the area that you moved to? Like what's that decision framework?
I always knew I wanted to move to the suburbs, and I always knew I wanted to move to Jersey. Like those were 2 things that I was just always set on. I lived in New York until I was 3 and then was raised in Central Jersey, and for me, I have no memories of New York, but I was like, as a parent, I wanna have our first kid in the city, and I think having a newborn/baby in New York is so fun, and then there
Agree.
hits a stage where it just does get difficult, and because of that, I think maybe our timing was a little earlier than we would have ever thought because of COVID, because then my husband started working from home and we were in an apartment and I was like, okay, this is a little bit more difficult with a kid. So maybe we would have stayed a little longer had COVID not happened. But I always knew we wanted to be in New Jersey. And that helped in the sense of like just looking in areas. And we fell in love with our area that we moved to honestly like a few years ago, and the transition has been interesting because I'm so happy in our house. Like I love it. I love that we're in a neighborhood because I didn't grow up in a neighborhood. It's been so much fun for me to experience that from like with our kids. It's just so enjoyable. And I love that we can walk places because I didn't grow up being able to walk anywhere. So it just feels so different. But I also got pregnant 3 weeks after moving. And that threw a little bit of a curveball because then I had a really shitty first trimester. So I wasn't trying to meet people or socialize. And all of these plans I had for things we were doing around the house, I was suddenly like, I just need to be horizontal. I can't think of anything. So I feel right now a lot of pressure to like get a few things done before postpartum comes around because I'm like, well, fuck, I thought I was going to get this done by now being in the house 9 months. But um I feel once I started to feel better through my pregnancy, I enjoyed the experience more because I was able to do more things, meet more people, but I still feel I haven't necessarily like gotten my complete footing.
Yeah. I was the exact same way. I was pregnant when we moved to the suburbs and I do feel like it you're also like at least for me, I'm like I just need to get through this time. Like you're
Yes.
not like motivated to like make it the best experience ever. I was in survival mode while I'm pregnant. And now that I'm like kind of coming out of postpartum, I'm like, oh, where the F am I? I'm like, I gotta figure out like what I'm doing and where I live and who are my neighbors. My
Right.
God. But it is hard. Is there anything specifically that you're doing to make it feel more like home for anyone who's listening, who's like about to make this jump?
Yeah, I don't know if it's make it feel more like home, but I will say my biggest piece of advice, and I know we are different in this, but I lived in our house first before we ordered anything. And I do personally feel that was a really good idea because I had these concepts of what I wanted to turn things into. And then when we lived here, I was like, wait, we don't need that. Or actually, I want to use this space this way or that. So, like, give yourself grace in the window of time that your house will be furnished. Like we still we're 9 months in, are like still painting rooms, hanging light fixtures, ordering furniture. Like we're not done. I'm proud of what we've done so far, but it takes so much time and money. So like give yourself time with that. Um in terms of making it feel like home for us, my biggest thing was I just want to feel like peaceful and cozy and safe and like calm in the area. And I think we've done that with the way we've decorated, but also when you're like looking at homes to actually move into, the layout. Like for us, we have this open area on our first floor that is so pivotal for the way that we live our lives, with the kitchen being open, me being able to be there and still see my child in his play area. And also like we have kids, there are going to be toys everywhere. Like I'm
Mhm.
not someone that like you walk in a house and it doesn't look like they have kids. Like the first floor has a full kid zone. Um and owning that. It's like this is just stage of your life. You can't act
Mhm.
like you're not dealing with children's toys.
No, I'm the same. We got a full kids corner.
Yeah,
But
and like gates everywhere.
so many gates, so many gates.
So many gates.
Yeah. No, I think that's some good nuggets there. This has been wonderful. Thank you so
So
much for
proud of
coming
you.
on. Where can everyone find you? I have to ask.
TikTok and Instagram at Cameron Oaks Rogers. And then the podcast, Emily's been a repeat guest, is Freckled Foodie and Friends. And I release an episode every Wednesday morning.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming on, Cameron.
Thank you.